Hello everyone, this is the Atheist Apple here. Today on this episode of Atheist Apple Radio, I will be discussing just the 10 main reasons why I do not believe that there is a God, and why I do not believe that any religion holds any credibility. Now, obviously this is a very simple topic, but I think it's very important for religious people to understand why atheists are atheists, why they reject the notion of God, and why they think that the belief in God is a silly belief. Obviously, there are people out there in the world who do believe that God is real with all their heart. For instance, if there's a mother who is a Christian and her son becomes an atheist, the mother, obviously, if she believes with all her heart that God exists, she will not be able to grasp why her son has become an atheist. But at the same time, the son will have not been able to grasp why the mother believes in a God. So, obviously, there's this conflict here where the Christians believe with all their heart that they are true, and I guess you could say that atheists believe, using the evidence, that their non-belief is more credible. So let's start off this list. We're going to be going from 10 to 1. I've tried to organize this list in such a manner that each reason why I don't believe in God becomes a little bit more dominant. So let's start with number 10, and that is simply the fact that there are many religions globally, and that each religion believes their particular belief system to be true, and other religions to be false. You have Christians out there who believe that, their God is the true God, but in order to believe that, you have to believe that the other 5 billion people around the world are incorrect, and they're going to all go burn in hell. It's a very selfish belief. But at the same time, you have to realize that, the Muslims believe that as well. They believe that their God is true, and that all the Christians are going to go burn in hell, or Muslim hell, or whatever they have. So most of these religions, they hold contradictory information. They all hold different explanations for phenomena, revolve around different stories. And, the beliefs that Christianity is true just directly contradicts with Islam's belief that Allah and Muhammad's existences are true. But this contradiction also holds for every other religion ever created. The ancient Egyptians, they believed with as much certainty as people do today that their gods were in fact the truth, and no exceptions. So, if we believe that their gods were fairy tales, what's to stop us from understanding that our religions today aren't fairy tales as well? It's definitely confirmation bias. Whatever religion you were brought up in, and we'll discuss that later, you will be biased towards that religion. That's been shown. Number 9, the progression and advancement of science. Back when the population of the Earth revolved around superstition and people were not scientifically advanced, many natural phenomena could not be adequately explained. We would all explain them with supernatural explanations and gods. There are many myths about how earthquakes, tornadoes, waves, rain, and other weather occurred, but all of these myths and legends about the origins of these phenomena revolved around supernatural elements, because we didn't know how else it could have been done. However, as science advanced, these supernatural explanations of the phenomena have been replaced with natural explanations. We know now that earthquakes occur without having to invent stories or rely on ghostly gods to explain them. We can actually now look at these phenomena and study the different triggers, evidences, and other things related to them in order to adequately explain them. There's no storytelling required. So this is where the God of the Gaps argument comes into play. A theist or a Christian might say, for instance, well, can you explain the origin of the universe? No, you can't? Well, then it was clearly God. But any rational person can look at this and they can see how flawed and just ridiculous that argument is. Because the theist automatically assumes that God is the cause of some phenomena immediately, just because science lacks a current understanding of it. But just because science doesn't know why a phenomenon occurs doesn't mean it never will. That doesn't mean that it never will understand. And filling that gap in with magic or a god, which is ancient. I mean, scientifically absent cultures did that. It explains nothing. It's fine to not know, and you see, uncertainty is the most valid position in anything. Number 8. The fact that a given theist is part of their respective religion at all. The fact that people are part of their respective religions. The fact that religion runs in families. See, a Christian is probably a Christian because they were raised Christian in a Christian part of the world or through a Christian family. A Muslim is probably a Muslim because they were raised by a Muslim family or in a Muslim part of the world. And that's why this question, it gets them every single time. You say, why are you a Christian? Why are you not a Muslim? Because my parents brought me up as Christian. So a Christian believing his or her religion is undoubtedly true is very folly. I mean, all one needs to do is simply ask them what they would believe if they were brought up in a Muslim family. Because if you were brought up in a Muslim family, you would probably be believing that Muhammad is the prophet of Allah and all that kind of stuff. So in order for a Christian to believe that their beliefs are undoubtedly true, they have to believe this, that they just so happen to be born into the family that chose the correct beliefs out of all the other possibilities and all the other religions in the world, all possible gods, and chose the correct denomination of Christianity, of which there are over thousands. So number 7 is that religion has just been responsible for countless horrors throughout the past, and it continues to do so today. I mean, to name a few, you have religious wars, jihads, discrimination of homosexuality and other related issues, burning of witches at the stake and the Great Awakenings, 9/11, the shootings, the more recent shootings at the Pensacola abortion clinic, many terrorist threats to all portions of the world, and many nameless human sacrifices. Now, there are a lot of Christians out there who say, well, Hitler was an atheist, which of course he was not, and Stalin was an atheist. And while Stalin, yes, was an atheist, undoubtedly, his atheistic beliefs in no way provoked him to kill all those people. Whereas when you take a look at the abortion clinic shootings, the religious wars, burning of witches, 9/11, the terrorist threats, those are all done in the name of religion. I mean, they're all done in the name of religion. Number 6 is just the involvement of magic. I mean, magic is something that most of us accept as untrue. I mean, in a certain sense. I mean, if one were to go to a magic show, like an illusionist or something like that, I mean, it would probably be widely acknowledged that the illusionist on the stage is performing nothing more than illusions and not real magic. Because we all say magic doesn't exist. But when you say that, you're not thinking about religion. Because when it comes to religion, magic is somehow accepted as true. Magic is used to explain everything when you're talking about religion, especially the existence of the universe. I mean, if you take a look at the Harry Potter, for example, I mean, obviously those stories revolve all around magic. So if we can easily accept that the magic that is presented in those novels is not actually true in real life, then why does the magic of God hold any more credibility, or the magic of Jesus or anything like that? So number 5 is just the failure of religion to expand or clarify over time. It's just basically stayed all dark. Now, science is reliable because of its constant changes. We use science in a way that, if the evidence does not correlate with our observations, then we need to reevaluate the problem. We don't just simply ignore the contradicting evidence, which is what religion does. See, religion is not clarified. We know nothing more about this mysterious God than we did thousands of years ago. In fact, religion seems to have actually diminished in understanding. I mean, back in biblical times, God was revealing himself and there were all these answers. But now, all of a sudden, none of this is happening anymore. He's not intervening anymore. Jesus is not coming back. It seems to be diminishing, if anything. So number 4, God is invisible, apparently, and prayer doesn't always seem to work. It seems to be nothing more than confirmation bias. So God has never really revealed, and actually God has never revealed himself to me. I don't know what else I was going to say there. As he has supposedly done to others. It's like he wants me to reject him. He doesn't show his existence to me. In fact, he makes it look like he's not there. See, because the invisible and the non-existent, they look very similar. I mean, sometimes you can't tell the two apart. I mean, according to... Okay, so I recently saw this on Christianity.com. It said that God answers prayers in the forms of yes, no, and wait. So, for instance, if you were to pray for more money, God would answer yes, and maybe send you a tax rebate check in the mail, or no, and then you wouldn't get that tax rebate check in the mail, or wait, in which case you'd get the tax rebate check 6 months from now, or something like that. But in this case, God can never lose. God is always good, because, I mean, even if, and there was a really good example that I saw once about a kid who gets shot in the wrong neighborhood, and there's all these different examples about if he lives, if he becomes paralyzed, and if he dies, but it's all rationalized with God's plan. If the kid comes out perfectly fine from these shootings, then, it was God's will that he be perfectly fine. If the kid comes out paralyzed, God is good because he still had a plan or something. And if the kid actually dies, God is still good because the kid is apparently in a better place now. See, God can never lose. God is always good, and it's really nothing more than confirmation bias. If there's a plane wreck that kills 200 people, but one child survives, people seem to ignore those 200 people that died, and they focus on the one kid who survived and claim that it was a miracle. No, that was not a miracle. 200 people just died, and you're simply ignoring them. It's absolutely ridiculous. So, number 3, the insanity of the Bible. I mean, you can't go, you can't take a rant about religion without mentioning the insanity of the Bible, especially the Old Testament. Now, I mean, it has things like they're saying that, if your neighbor works on Sunday, you need to kill him. If your child is disobedient, you need to kill him. If a woman grabs a man's genitals while 2 men are engaging in a fight, you need to cut her hand off. If you rape a woman, you're allowed to, I think it's either you have to or you're allowed to marry her. And then there's my favorite verse in the Bible, which comes from Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 1. It says, he who hath cut off his privy member or hath crushed his stones may not enter into the congregation of the Lord. Which basically says that if men's genitals are mutilated in any way, they basically can't get into heaven. Which makes God look really, really strange. I mean, there's a lot of stuff about the male genitals in the Bible. It's almost as if God was obsessed with them, and I would not want to be worshiping a God who is obsessed with the male genitals. It's absolutely ridiculous. Now, Christians today have developed this notion that the Old Testament is basically, they just ignore it now, and they say, well, it's all about the New Testament, where Jesus came and all that stuff. But the problem is that the Bible was supposed to be written or inspired or whatever by God. And that means that basically this New Testament came around in which God basically apologized for all the crap that he had in the Old Testament. It really doesn't make God look very perfect. He says, oh, I'm sorry, I said all this crap in the Old Testament, but now I'm going to send Jesus to redeem you of your sins. He seems very selfish. But here's the way I put it. God said these terrible things one way or another. And it doesn't matter if I'm taking them out of context or not. The thing that I say, and I'm sure I mentioned this in the last radio video, but, Christians always get all over the atheists' butts by saying that they're taking these verses out of context. Now, really, that doesn't mean anything. what I would do to reply to that is, if you take a look on the back of people's cars, you'll see bumper stickers that are quoting, like, love your neighbor as yourself, or all the little goody two-shoes Bible verses like that. But what I always say to that is, well, aren't those people taking those verses out of context? It shouldn't matter whether or not they convey a good message or a bad message. If you think that it's bad to take these particular verses out of context, then it should be bad to take any verse out of context. I'm not going to quote the entire Bible. I mean, is that what you want me to do? But either way, God said these terrible things. He said these awful things, which therefore makes him a bad God. I don't care what context God said these things in. He still said them. He still told parents to kill their children if they were disobedient. He still told people to kill their neighbors on the Sabbath. It doesn't matter what context that's in. God still told him to do it. Therefore, God made immoral decisions, or at least immoral by the people's standards. It just shows you how much the Old Testament is ignored. You do not see people today walking around saying, oh, my neighbor's working on Sunday. I really should kill him. I mean, people don't do that. We don't take our religion as seriously as people like Ken Ham or Cy Ten Bruggencate say we should. And they just ignore it. And then they make all these rationalizations as to why they ignore it. It's allegorical or something like that. And one of my favorite things is what Cy Ten Bruggencate said in his debate with Matt Dillahunty on whether or not it was reasonable to believe that God exists. One of the audience members brought up the question of why these particular verses were in the Bible, which Cy Ten Bruggencate believed to be perfect. And his answer was, I don't do Bible studies with atheists. He said, I'm not going to do a Bible study with you because you don't believe that it's literally true. Well, there's two things that are wrong with that. First of all, Bible studies should be performed so that people can learn more about the Bible. I want to know why God said this, so please do a Bible study with me. I'm not just going to say, oh, all is perfect, so now why did God say this? That's ridiculous. And the second thing is that, this whole thing, the whole reason that he said I don't do Bible studies with atheists is probably just because he clearly doesn't understand why God would have said stuff like that. He doesn't have a good rationalization for it, and I have yet to hear why God would have even said that, besides the fact that he is just a terrible, immoral being. The New Testament isn't much better. Jesus said in the New Testament that he came not to bring peace, but a sword. And one of the things that startles me most about the New Testament is why this whole bloody crucifixion needed to be performed in the first place, to forgive people of the original sin or the sins that they had done or whatever. Why couldn't God just have forgiven? It makes him seem a little less omnipotent than he previously seemed. And number two, rationalizations and excuses for God's existence. There are just so many very clear rationalizations and stupid excuses for why God exists. First of all, I have to question why God needs these people to rationalize his existence. Why can't this apparently all-powerful and all-knowing God just convince atheists himself? Because an all-powerful, all-knowing God would be able to convince atheists of his existence. He could beam the knowledge into their head. He could rewire their brain to make it so that they believed in God, believed in him. I also have to question why God, they always say, one of the more popular excuses that I hear is that, God must remain hidden. But they say, oh, blah, 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 God must remain hidden. But the thing is, what I've noticed is that God doesn't really seem hidden. If you take a look at the stuff in the Old Testament, he didn't seem very hidden. He was coming out here and there. He was interfering with the people. He was revealing to them that he existed. Everyone knew with absolute certainty that God existed back then. And now all of a sudden he must remain. The Old Testament sure doesn't make it look like God must remain hidden. If God really must remain that hidden, why do people even know of his existence? It sounds to me like he wants to be extremely secretive. And not only that, But God apparently wrote an entire book about himself. I mean, that's not trying to stay hidden. That's just begging for attention right there. And you hear all these other rationalizations too, like God works in mysterious ways. Well, and those are just excuses as to why God is still good. You know, it's more of what we were talking about earlier, as to how people are God biased, how God is always good. And children starving in Africa, God is still good. Why? Because he works in mysterious ways that we can't understand. It's just a stupid rationalization, and it's nothing more. But, I mean, you just have so many people that aren't willing to admit their rationalizations. And they're not willing to admit that they're just ridiculous. Because they're so biased towards this idea of God that they're just making these outlandish claims left and right just to make this whole thing make any sense at all. Number one, and this is just the reason why any atheist believes in God. I mean, all the other reasons kind of just pale in comparison to this particular reason. It's just that there is no evidence for God's existence. There's a complete lack of solid evidence for his existence, and he has not been proven to exist. Of course, we all know, with the exception of some stupid apologists out there, that the burden of proof is on those, or the people or the party, asserting the claim. If I claim to you that the purple tickle monster exists, the default position is to reject that claim. The default position is to say, no, the purple tickle monster does not exist. And you are free to say that. It is logical to believe that the purple tickle monster does not exist until the person who says that he exists proves that he exists. And that same exact logic is applied to God. If you make the claim that God exists, I will reject that claim unless you can provide me with evidence, solid evidence, not a bunch of rationalizations like, well, what created the universe? No God of the gaps arguing, no saying, look around, the Bible. That's not evidence. Real evidence that God exists. Until you present that evidence to me, I will continue to not believe in God, and I will continue to be an atheist. I am an atheist towards vampires. Why? Because vampires have not been proven to exist. They have not been rationally, there has been no empirical solid evidence that vampires exist. Same with every other creature of course, with the exceptions of the ones that we have proven to exist. Every other creature you could possibly imagine. You know, not only the purple tickle monster, God, vampires, but a magical rainbow with a face floating around in outer space. Russell's teapot, the flying spaghetti monster, the invisible pink unicorn. Anything you could possibly imagine does not exist until it has been proven to exist. The oceans don't exist until they have been proven to exist. I mean, it seems a little bit weird to make the claim that oceans don't exist until we've been proven that they exist. Because we know for a fact that they exist. But you have to ask, why do we know they exist? Because they are testable with our five senses. We can see the ocean, smell the ocean, hear the ocean, feel the ocean, and taste the ocean, I guess, if you wanted to. The ocean is testable with our five senses. That is the evidence that the ocean exists. God, the purple tickle monster, Russell's teapot, the flying spaghetti monster, they are not testable with our five senses, as of right now. They're not. So we have every reason to dismiss that claim. The Russell's teapot is a little bit different, but you know, with beings like God and the flying spaghetti monster, they do not exist until they can be proven to exist. And as of right now, they have most certainly not been proven to exist. And that is why we do not believe in God. That is the main evidence, the main reason that atheists do not believe in God. It doesn't get much more simple than that. Anyway, those are the top 10 reasons why I and other atheists do not believe in God. And that is the reason why, those are the reasons why a belief in God is nothing more than superstition and irrational thinking. In the meantime, though, We will be keeping you updated on more Atheist Apple videos and radio. I'm the Atheist Apple. Keep it fruity, everyone.